Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, we're jumping right into one of the absolute most chilling visual mysteries of the entire 20th century today. We aren't just sitting around the campfire telling a ghost story here. We are going to completely dissect the history, the actual evidence, and the really fierce debate behind the legendary Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. Let's get into it.
Quick, there's something. Are you ready? Imagine hearing those frantic words. They were shouted by a photographer's assistant, a guy named Andre Shira, on a really crisp afternoon back in 1936. And those exact words triggered the capture of what a lot of people honestly believe is the ultimate proof of the afterlife. It was just a sudden shout that completely interrupted a standard, somewhat boring architectural photo shoot, but it birthed an absolute paranormal legend. So let's break down exactly how this moment changed everything.
Section 1. The most famous ghost photo.
So when this incredible image actually hit the pages of Country Life magazine on December 26, 1936, it literally skyrocketed this local Norfolk folklore right into an international sensation. I mean, readers opened up their magazines expecting photos of houses, and instead they saw this grand oak staircase, and right there, gliding down the steps, is this distinct, luminous, veiled form of a woman. It left absolutely everyone asking, who exactly was this spectral woman? And, could a camera truly capture a human soul? Well, to answer that, we've got to look back.
Because the lore of Raynham Hall doesn't just start with that one famous photograph. Not at all. It stretches over 2 whole centuries of aristocratic tragedy and some pretty terrifying, highly documented encounters. The timeline basically starts way back in 1726 with the tragic death of the lady of the house. Then we see these huge explosive sightings in the 1830s, which ultimately build up to that crazy flashbulb moment in 1936. Moving on to Section 2, the tragic Lady Dorothy. Now, to really understand the phantom, we have to look impartially at the real life of Lady Dorothy Walpole. Local folklore insists that she was locked away and brutally starved to death by her extremely jealous husband. But when we actually look at historical records, they point to a very different, but honestly equally tragic fate. She died from a fatal battle with smallpox in 1726. Plus, there's a big logic gap here. Her brother was Sir Robert Walpole, literally the country's most powerful politician, and he lived just a few miles away. So a systematic starvation cover-up by her husband? Yeah, highly unlikely without some severe political consequences. However, even if the murder story is a myth, the tragedy of her emotional isolation and heartbreak is historically undeniable. It really sets the perfect atmospheric stage for a restless, grieving spirit. The archives reveal that her marriage to Charles Townshend, a guy with a notoriously violent temper, by the way, was deeply unhappy. And right before her death at just 39 years old, she was permanently separated from her 6 surviving children. Their upbringing was just completely handed over to their grandmother. So, stripped of her maternal role, she suffered severe mental anguish. Believers say it's this profound, heartbreaking sorrow that supposedly anchored her spirit to Raynham Hall forever. Which brings us to Section 3, 19th century ghostly encounters. By the 1800s, this sorrowful history had completely evolved into terrifying folklore. During a Christmas gathering in 1835, the haunting escalated dramatically. A guest, Major Loftus, reported seeing a handsome woman wearing an antique brown brocade dress out on the landing. So naturally, he staked out the corridor the very next night to get a better look. But this time, he noted something horrifying. Her face was glowing, but where her eyes should have been, there were only dark, empty sockets. This face-to-face encounter terrified the household so much that staff members literally quit their jobs en masse. It got so bad that the bewildered Lord Townshend actually had to hire detectives to stake out his own home. Crazy, right? But the absolute most dramatic standoff happened just a year later in 1836. This skeptical naval captain and novelist, Frederick Marryat, who was actually a friend of Charles Dickens, fun fact, tried to prove the ghost was just a hoax created by local smugglers trying to scare people away. Marryat wasn't having any of the ghost stories. He deliberately demanded to sleep in the haunted room, the exact one containing Dorothy's portrait, and he made sure to keep a loaded revolver right beneath his pillow to debunk the whole myth. According to his daughter Florence, who later recounted the story, Marryat and 2 of his young nephews were walking in a dark hallway when a figure approached carrying a lighted lamp. As she drew closer, he realized she perfectly mirrored the portrait of the Brown Lady. She stopped,
held the lamp right up to her face, and flashed what Florence described as a malicious and diabolical grin. Infuriated and probably pretty terrified, Marriott pulled his revolver and fired point blank into the apparition's face. The figure vanished instantly, but the bullet, it lodged firmly in a wooden door panel, a bullet hole that apparently you can still see in the house today.
All right, Section 4, Capturing the Brown Lady. So this brings us right back to that fateful day in 1936, pivoting from spooky campfire stories to an actual modern investigation. The capture of the photo happened in a matter of frantic seconds. Step 1, Captain Provand was under his black cloth, focusing the camera on the grand staircase. Step 2, his assistant Indre Shira suddenly spotted a vaporous form gliding down the steps. Step 3, Shira yells and Provand rips the lens cap off. And finally, Step 4, Shira fires off the flashlight pistol. On the train ride back to London, Provand actually insisted it was impossible to photograph a ghost, and he bet Shira £5 that the negative would just be blank. Well, he lost that bet big time in the darkroom when the image materialized right before their very eyes. Which leads us to Section 5, Proof or Photographic Fraud. When the negative was developed, the resulting image completely shocked the world and instantly split public opinion into two fiercely debated camps. On the believer's side, respected paranormal experts like Harry Price interviewed the photographers and confidently declared the negative was entirely innocent of any faking. But then, on the skeptic side, modern scientific investigators like Joe Nickell claim that a detailed analysis shows undeniable technical anomalies, evidence that absolutely screams double exposure. Let's dig into how analysts break down the mechanics of potential fraud here. Remember, early cameras required really long exposures, sometimes up to 6 whole seconds. That means a regular person just walking down the stairs could easily create a blurred, transparent, ghost-like effect. Other skeptics suggest the photographers simply smeared grease right on the camera lens, or, honestly, just staged a hoax by completely draping a person in a bed sheet. In fact, a magician named John Booth perfectly replicated the photo later on at the Magic Castle in Hollywood, using literally just a colleague and a standard bedsheet. But here is perhaps the most striking skeptical theory of all, that the ghostly figure is actually just a perfectly superimposed image of a standard Catholic Virgin Mary statue. When you look closely at the visual mapping, the bright light patch resembles an inverted V, just like a draped outer garment on a statue. The figure's head appears to be covered, the hands look like they're folded in prayer, and honestly, most damning of all, there is a very visible, hard, rectangular pedestal right at the base of the figure. It strongly suggests a double exposure trick, basically overlaying a common church statue right onto the empty stairs of Raynham Hall. So as we wrap up this explainer, we're laying all the evidence before you neutrally. We really want to leave it up to you to decide what truly descended the stairs of Raynham Hall that day. Is this the tragic, lingering soul of Lady Dorothy Walpole, a heartbroken mother endlessly searching for the children she was so cruelly separated from? Or is it just a clever, masterclass-level photographic illusion perfectly leveraging the long-standing folklore of a famous house? Now, the technical evidence definitely leans heavily toward a man-made manipulation, yet the legend itself and those chilling face-to-face encounters from people who walked those halls long before cameras even existed, well, those remain impossible to fully erase. So I'll leave you with this one final thought. If it really was just a trick of the light, why does the brown lady still haunt our imaginations almost a century later?